I'll leave this here for a moment so people can process it. It uh, it's something that we don't talk about in New Zealand. It's something we're going to have to talk about at some point because obviously it's becoming more and more urgent by the day. Um, do I expect most New Zealanders to recognise it for what it is? Not really. Especially the young ones. The young ones have been thoroughly indoctrinated, so they won't want to accept any of this. But I'm going to tell this story right from the bedrock of the story, if you know what I mean, and I'm going to do it in a way that will enable you to go and check out what I've said, so you can decide whether I'm talking crap or not. Because of course that's what I'll be accused of. But anyway, so here we go. Um, so the great Kiwi lie. You know, it's clear to people like me, older people who've been around for a while and watched all this develop, that this great New Zealand lie has developed over time, and it's developed especially in times of, I mean, it develops under both governments, but the people who excel in the stakes of telling lies are, of course, the left, because the left is just what the left do. They will they absolutely believe in ideology, and they'll shove it up your nose as far as they can get it to go. And so, and if you try and talk to them about how foolhardy some of it is, you just run into a brick wall. And I know I'll run into a brick wall here, but that's all right. I'm talking to a machine. So all you can do, might as well do it now, is flick the stop button and go and wank in the kitchen somewhere. Fuck. This is the truth of the New Zealand thing, right? Now, so what you've got to do is you've got to go back in time to like 200 years to, I think, 1870 something, when Abel Tasman first arrived here. There was a dispute between him and I think it happened at did it happen at Golden Bay, somewhere like that? Murderer's Bay, he called it. When they killed and ate sort of 5 or 6 of his men. Maoris killed and ate 5 or 6 of his men. The thing was that we will have to own up to, and we have to recognise and realise as true, is that Maoris were, when the Europeans came here, Maoris were cannibals. It was part of their living culture. Cannibalism just was. They did it for a range of reasons, not the least of which was so that they wouldn't go hungry. But there were reasons of pride and all this sort of thing, and also utu, and which is another word for anger and revenge, as they could display it to a tribe that they had an argument with. And the other thing, so the cannibalism was one thing, and the tribal wars were another. Now, I don't want to make any of these I don't want to talk about tribal wars or cannibalism without offering something approaching, indisputable truth. So we'll start with tribal wars, shall we? Tribal wars. Now, if you live in Auckland, and a lot of people do, but even if you live in bloody Timbuktu, and you've got Google Earth, you can put up on Google Earth the picture of Auckland from above. I could do it on this other computer. Maybe I should do it, maybe to illustrate this. I'll try it while I'm talking. And so I'm not sure whether Google Earth's on this other one. But when you look at the volcanic cones in Auckland, you can see the battlements that were built there by Maori. Just can. And so it's a difficult thing for you to look at the battlements on Mount Eden and the others. I don't know exactly which ones they are, but they're easy to find. But you can look at them and you can see that somewhere in the past, Maoris had dug out, what amounted to redoubts on the slopes of each one of those bloody volcanic cones. And so that meant that they were there for their protection. And so the thing that's missing from all that now that was certainly visible in the past was the what do you call those things? The Maori villages, which were always protected by a stockade, and so I don't want to talk shit about this and not sort of. I feel as I have to make all this whatever evidence I can find available to people who are looking, because they'll just say it's all not true, and it is true, and so I'll just put into Google Maori fortifications. Come on, Google. Maori fortifications. It's decided they're going to spell Maori wrong, and up comes these instantly. There's these pictures of Maori fortifications. So we'll put in images, and here there's no. It's not as though they're hard to find. There's dozens of them, right? And so let's blow one up. Here's a typical picture of a Maori fortification, but there's, I think, Mount Eden or one of those. See the fortifications? They're still there. You can see them when you drive by. You don't have to have X-ray vision or something. There's another picture there. Look at it. It's clear and obvious to anybody with half a brain. And so there was a reason why Maori were, and here, I'll tell you all about it. Go and read it. Go and read it. Read it properly and understand what it actually means. And what it means is that Maori were at war with each other. They just were. And so what did they build fortifications for? They didn't build the fortifications to protect them from lions and tigers, because there weren't any. And back then in the day when that fortification was built, that's pre-European. No Europeans here either. So they didn't build them to protect themselves from Europeans. And anyway, the Europeans had guns. So they could just go shoot that guy up there and they could be shot. The Maoris knew that. They weren't stupid. And it was the first thing they went looking for when they realised what the difference was between Europeans and Maori. Guns. Guns. Famous for getting muskets. And then and they had the musket wars. Musket wars. They armed themselves to the teeth with muskets with the help of Europeans who were selling them muskets. And you can look it up on the, maybe shall I look it up? So show, where's Google again? Musket Wars. And so Musket Wars was not a war between Europeans and Maori, but they were fought with muskets, and they were between Maori tribes. Musket Wars. There they are, the Musket Wars, the history of the Musket Wars. Musket Wars. And so Musket Wars was a series of many 3,000 odd battles and raids fought throughout New Zealand among Maori. Among Maori. There it is. See? Down here, that's what it says. So I'll read it out again. Musket Wars were a series of as many as 3,000 battles and raids fought throughout New Zealand among Maori between 1807 and 1837. Note well that 1837 is 3 years before the Treaty of Waitangi was signed. So we'll talk about that in a minute as well. And that was after Maori first obtained muskets and then engaged in intertribal arms race in order to get territory or seek revenge for past defeats. Now, the people try and the people who write the history, the people at universities and places like that, who apparently have license to write whatever they fucking feel like, they tell these stories, but they sort of tell them, it's what they don't tell you that's important rather than what they do tell you. And so the Musket Wars, and there was a, they don't, in that little snippet there, they don't mention the number of people killed. But, here New Zealand Online History will tell you that Musket Wars, I think they reckon up to 50,000 Maori died. 50, from what I've read, when Europeans arrived in New Zealand, there were 100 and and 110 to 120,000 Maori here. And there was a sort of, I don't know, some missionary sort of counted them up and said, geez, look at that. We'll have all those, they can be all Christians. That's 120,000 Christians. Woo! We can collect money from all of them. And so somebody made a wild guess. So it says here, and this will be in the New Zealand history. Can you believe it? You can't really. But they were fighting over territory, and that's why. But even before the Europeans came here and provided muskets so they could fight with guns, they were still busy attacking each other and having to have fortified villages to exist. They just were. So the fortified villages weren't built to protect them from Europeans. They were built to protect them from other Maori. Think about that. It's a tradition. Traditions go back a long way. The expertise to build those bloody fortifications took generations to come up with. I mean, figure out a bunch of Maori people trying to figure out how to dig in those volcanic cones without any steel tools. So that brings me to the other really important thing about all this, that ordinary people, but ordinary people will figure this out because they're not stupid. But in universities in New Zealand and in schools and in primary schools and all this sort of stuff, there are a lot of stupid teachers. Beyond belief stupid. What they learn would tell them quite clearly that Maori didn't have metal of any kind. No metal of any kind. They did not know how to smelt metal. That meant they could not make blades. So no blades. That meant no knives, no swords, no picks and shovels. And no. It beggars belief. It's really hard to imagine a world without metal and without metal tools. But Maori, that was the Maori world when we arrived here. They didn't get metal tools until we arrived. Now, so what you've got to do is you've got to stack that up against the number. There's a whole bunch of things all come together. But, those idiots in the universities and other places avoid some of this stuff. But as I read out there just a few moments ago, the musket wars, which were an absolute killing fields in New Zealand, Maori against Maori, didn't stop until 1837. Now, stop for a minute if you're grown up. I know that may not necessarily apply to a person in university, but if you're grown up, you can figure out that 1837 was 3 years before the Treaty of Waitangi was signed. 3 years. And so why? So go on, sit there in your sort of seat in the university and tell me that one thing had nothing to do with the other. Tell me that the signing of the Treaty of Waitangi had nothing whatsoever to do with the musket wars, you fucking idiots. And so for people like me who are practical, I mean, we listen to all this claptrap from you clowns, and it's very hard to sort of take seriously, and especially when we know they pay you people shitloads of money to talk crap on a daily basis to the whole country. And and all those idiot bloody TV people, they'll rush down there and talk to some fucking clown from I don't know, Auckland University about what happened back in the Maori times, but they never get the truth because the idiots don't tell the truth. So we've dealt with no metal, right? No metal. Now, think back a moment to those volcanic cones that I showed you before, with those battlements on the volcanic cones, right? There's no water source up there. There's no, a river has to have a source. It has to have a sort of, a river or a stream or a creek needs to develop over distance. It doesn't just sort of, you won't, in a storm you'll get some water rushing down from the top of a hill. But, but as soon as the storm's gone, the water's gone. So how did they get water up there? You do understand. Do those university people understand what it means when I tell them that Maoris did not have ceramics? There's so much shit that we use ceramics for. God knows I can't find any in here at the moment, but ceramics. And with ceramics, there is also pottery, which is a simple form of ceramics, Pottery, you just make it out of mud. All you need is a certain type of mud and a decent fire, and you can fire pottery. Maoris couldn't do that. They did not. Go and have a look in a fucking university. Go and have a look anywhere where a university person will send you, and have a look for Maori ceramics or Maori pottery. You will not find it, because it didn't exist. They were not able to make receptacles of any kind, except they could hew them. They didn't have proper knives. They could, they used a sharp bit of stone, and they could dig a bloody hollow into a piece of wood, which would enable them to carry a little bit of water, but not much. Think about trying to walk. Think about how much time it would take to hollow out a log in the shape of something that was going to carry water. It'd be worth a bloody fortune in Maori time. So, they've lied to you. I'm not saying that Maoris have lied to you, because I think a lot of them don't even know. They would, and the problem is that they would think it was an insult for us to say, oh, by the way, you people didn't have pottery. And by the way, you people didn't have ceramics. And they go, what? How can you say that about us? We're not that stupid. It's got nothing to do with being stupid. Nothing whatsoever. What it's got to do with is what a people managed to develop over time. And in the New Zealand way, the Maoris, they think about it. You're living in that Maori village, and you want a drink of water. You not only do you want one, but you need a drink of water. And if you're sick, someone's got to carry you down to the river, or try and figure out a way to carry water back to you. They might sort of soak water up into something and then squeeze it into your mouth. I don't know. There's going to be all kinds of ways that they might do that. But, they might think you're better off dead if you're in the process of dying for lack of water. But so those people living in those fortified villages, they had to go to think about Auckland and the layout. There's a whole lot of them, those volcanic cones, they all had forts on them. Think about where they would go for water. And also think about what would happen when two different groups of people got to the same water source at the same time. The people on the volcanic cone at Mount Eden couldn't telephone the people on the volcanic cone at, One Tree Hill or wherever it is, and say, oh, by the way, we're going down to the water. We're going down to the creek to get a bit of water. Have a drink. And so how would they have a drink? They would lay on the ground with their hands and drink fucking water. Because how else are they going to drink it? They haven't got anything to carry it in. They haven't got any ceramic, no pottery, no ceramics to put water in. So life was difficult. And so what people these days have to do when they think of this wonderful notion of Maori wonderfulness, what Maori did do, the reality of what they did do in the circumstances they were in was pretty extraordinary. But it was. You can't discount the fact that they've found a way to live with no pottery and no way to carry water and bugger all sort of in the way of decent meat, so they would eat each other. And so, and there was certain rituals associated. There were rituals associated with eating people. They're still there. The old ones, they'll talk about it. They're not, it's the young ones who won't want to talk about it. It's the young ones and the fuckwits at university who won't want to talk about it. Those fuckwits at university, they can't help themselves. They are basically ideologically driven. And so we need to figure out how stupid all that is. And we need to realize that we have been consistently lied to through generations by generations of bloody university professors and school teachers. School teachers are the worst. School teachers are the worst. They want a fancy little pretty story to tell all the little kiddies. Tell the little kiddies, oh, wonderful. They tell them lies. If the truth is too tough for them, leave it till they get a bit older. Don't make up a lie. But that's what the school teachers have been doing, making up lies. And so then there's the other thing. and it's about textiles or fabric, you know. Maori had no fabric. They didn't. I mean, they could weave flax, and I think that they could beat flax into a relatively soft, almost fabric. But I'll tell you what, the only one who would be getting anything that's relatively easy to wear would be the chief and his family and whatever, the people in charge. The kids at the bottom end of the scale, they wouldn't get a nice pair of pants made out of flax. Give me a break. And while we're on the subject of where to go, about the various reasons why you need to take your pants off, going for a shit. It's one of the things it is one of the things that they assiduously avoid discussing, and that's where to go for a shit when you're a Maori back here in 1780 or wherever. Do you know what I mean? They would just go and shit in a river or whatever. And people who visited the Pars in the very, very early days, Europeans who wrote down about it, these people, some of these people people are going to go, oh, they wouldn't tell the truth. Why would they not tell the truth? So they've travelled all the way on a stinking little sailboat, because that's what they were, 50-foot long bloody sailboat crowded to the eyeballs, with ridiculous sanitation and whatever. They'd sail all the way to New Zealand. And then they'd go and risk being slaughtered and go and talk to the Maoris about their life. Well, they did. There was not another Maori. It wasn't another Maori tribe who were able to do that. Mind you, there were other Polynesians who were picked up on the islands who were able to help them with the diplomacy, with that sort of thing. And I'm not going to go and tell all that history because I don't know it. But I do know that there was some Maori people who would some Polynesian people who travelled with the various people who come over here and helped the interplay between Maori and European. Because if you think about it, so here on the horizon is this sailboat that's got these sort of 4 great big trees on it with these huge sails. I mean, they knew what sails were because they used to bloody sail their fucking canoes. So, you see a boat with sails on it, you'd recognise it. But the difference would be the size of the sails and the efficiency of them and whatever. And think about how inefficient they were anyway, pushing those blunt little boats around the place. But, but the British and the French and the Spanish and a few of those other ones, Portuguese, they managed to sail those stumpy little boats all the way. They could organise themselves to provision the bloody things. They used to beat people up to get crew, so that by the time they woke up, they were at sea already. So the choice was, get stuck in and help us or we'll throw you over the side. I'm talking about the Europeans now. Do you think they wouldn't do that? Of course they would. All they wanted to do was get their sailboat going so they could be famous, Why were they doing it? Why were they sailing around the world to find stuff? There was future wealth to be had in being able to say to the government, we found this place. It's got coal. It's got gold. It's got wood. That's what they said about New Zealand. And you can do a fair bit of fishing down there as well. But I mean, what fishing are they going to do? What good would the fishing grounds be to the British people back in Britain? What are they going to do? How the hell are they ever going to take a whole bunch of fish back? It took 5 months sometimes to sail back. I mean, imagine the state of the fish after 5 months at sea. Give me a break. All you got to do is use your fucking brain. And the interesting thing for me about brains and university professors is that they seem to be devoid of brains, or certainly the ability to deploy their brains properly. So what have we got? I'm trying to paint you a picture. And it's got to be a picture that a university person can get their head around. Okay, no fabric. Cold. No fabric, couldn't keep themselves warm. Think about how they used to sleep when they couldn't keep themselves warm. They would all be cuddled up together. So, how long is a young virgin going to last before she's up the duff? Well, It's a question. Only a prick like me can ask it, but it's a question. And so, no fabric, no metal, nothing whatsoever made of metal. They couldn't make a knife. They couldn't make a fucking knife, for God's sake, Mr. University student. They could not make a knife or a blade or a sort of, I don't know, a meat cleaver or a decent axe. Nothing, because they did not have metal. So that brings us to the fabled Maori carvings. Now, we're led to believe now I'm a sculptor, right? And not only am I a sculptor, I can sit down with a piece of clay and make a likeness. I don't just make funny blobby things like some of these other fucking idiots who call themselves artists. I should have made sure I had something that I was responsible for here. But you know, I mean, everything I've made is kept on shelves in the house. I'm in the garage, and so nope, there's nothing here that I made. And but you know, I sat down. You can look it up. I sat down one day with Robert Muldoon. I rung him up and I said, how about I got this idea. How about I make a sculptured portrait of you, just your head and shoulders, and we can sit there and talk while I do it. And a talk can be recorded by those imbeciles at TVNZ, and we'll get, the people of New Zealand will get another picture of their Prime Minister. Because as I make a portrait of you in clay, you can make a portrait of yourself in words. So I sat with the Prime Minister for 5 mornings at an hour each. At the end of the 5 days, I had a very good likeness. And I should be able to show the skeptics there, I suppose. But, I think there might be one on this other computer, who knows. And so, I have a quick look. And so, yeah, here it is. Look at this. So here's a couple of pictures of other stuff that I've done. Because I'm not ashamed of anything that I've done. Come on, Rob, open up. Just these Apple computers. Okay, so this is the first portrait. I am a sculptor. Okay, and this is the first portrait I ever made. The only portrait I ever made and ever finished, right? And it was done live on TV of Rob Muldoon. Tell me that's not Rob Muldoon. Mind you, some of you young ones wouldn't know what Rob Muldoon looked like. He'd been dead a while now. And so here's another. I'll show you another bit of what I've done. Because I'm very proud of this. I was an artist who cared about people and things. And this is a sculpture I did. I did this in James Smith's department store up on the 4th floor. And it was to tell the story during the Cambodian War of what happened to Cambodian women and babies. And so there it is. And so, the arts people in New Zealand managed to completely fucking ignore that. I mean, people were going to the Arts Council, which was just down the road, and saying, you better go and have a look at what that guy Dennis Hall's doing and James Smith. Only one turned up, and he watched me for a while I was working, and I saw him, and I sort of acknowledged him, and there were a lot of ladies, mostly ladies around the place, because I was shopping. And he said to me, you shouldn't include sociological comment in your art. That's what he said. And I just sort of thought, you can go fuck yourself. You're obviously working for the Arts Council because you don't know shit from clay. So, I don't know how I got to that. But, I know. And so the thing is, I know about carving. I know what you need to carve wood. I got a friend who's I've got a couple of his sculptures here as well. Wood sculptures. You can't do a decent wood sculpture without steel tools. You just can't. Go and try it. Go and get some fucking greenstone, sharpen it up on another rock, and figure out a way to carve a great big prow on a canoe. That's not what they did back then. They couldn't do that until we arrived with steel tools. The Maori carvers at the time, who were trying to carve things with hammers and shards of rock, they would have taken one look at the chisel and thought that all their birthdays had come at once. And so that's where the Maori tradition of carving started. Not before we got here, after we got here. Just the truth of it. I mean, it's just obvious. That's not what the historians will tell you, because, they've got a vested interest in sort of shoring up all the stupid books and bullshit that have been written about this since time evermore. Shoring up the great New Zealand legend, telling the great New Zealand lie. No? And so what have we covered here? I mean, we've talked about no metal of any kind. So up against swords and knives with the British, they'd have no chance. They didn't, as far as I could work out, the Maori didn't even have a throwing spear. They might have had some throwing rocks, but they wouldn't have had a throwing spear. And they definitely didn't have a bow and arrow. I mean, the bow and arrow was invented in all kinds of places across the world, including sort of North American Indians. Whatever, not invented in Polynesia. They just weren't. And so I don't know why. What's that got to do with anything? Well, what it's got to do with things is that, they were very primitive when the Europeans got here. Life was not wonderful. Life was not wonderful for Maoris when Europeans came here, and the Maoris are not stupid. So they sort of saw the advantages that the Europeans carried around attached to their bodies, like knives, axes, hammers, chisels. And they went, we need some of that because they can do the stuff we want to do 100 times faster. And so they learned very fucking quickly to trade for tools. Just did. What do you want for those? What do you want for those one of those chisel things? Oh, how about a couple of your daughters? Well, university people wouldn't sort of get that, but I mean, that's what people do. So, I know I've got a very low tolerance for university people. Look, I've known some of them, and some of them were wonderful people, and I know they're extremely smart. But the ones that are pushing New Zealand history are full of shit. They just are full of crap. You can't do all this shit unless you understand the truth of what Maori were when we arrived, and the advantages, the immediate advantages were, I don't know, a bowl or a jar that they could trade a daughter for, that they could carry down to the water and carry it back home for mum who's sick. Well, think that's stupid? How would they get water? If mum's sick and dying, how are they going to get water to her? Pick her up and carry her down to the river. And then once they're there, how does she drink the water? Slops it and they're going to have to throw it on their face with their hands. Huh? So, I'm going to stop in a minute. I just think that and I'm going to do another one of these in very similar vein, because I really think it's vitally important that New Zealanders have the balls to front up and tell the truth about what they were and what their heritage is. And, nothing that Maori need to be ashamed of. They were primitive people. And they learned very, very quickly that we weren't, and that the only place they were going to get a hold of that shit was from the Europeans. And look, there's another couple of sort of salient facts here. Maoris, go back and look up the musket wars. The Maoris had thousands of muskets. Thousands of muskets. They could have a really substantial bloody war. They had so many muskets. And there were 2,000 Europeans in New Zealand, mainly up there around the Bay of Islands, and there were 120,000 Maori. Excuse me, 120,000 Maori armed to the teeth. And that was and that musket war ended 3 years before the Treaty of Waitangi was signed. At the signing of the Treaty of Waitangi, there were 2,200 Europeans in New Zealand going at it up. Half of them would be female. And some would be children. You know, use your brain. I know that it's hard for university people to use your brain, but use your brain. Back just immediately prior to the signing of the Treaty of Waitangi, there were 120,000 Maoris, and there were 120,000 against 2,200. And the Maoris were absolutely armed. You know, they had far more than 2,000 arms, so they were better armed than all of the Europeans. They could have driven them out in a heartbeat. But that's not what they did. They signed a treaty. When they signed a treaty ceding sovereignty. Why did they do that? Because they knew, they weren't stupid, those early Maori knew that the future was in the European culture. And to be part of the European culture, they had to be part of the European culture. Simple stuff. They weren't, like I said before, you know, they weren't stupid. But, you know, they were isolated from any development for centuries before the Europeans got here, because they must have been gobsmacked when they saw some of what... I mean, imagine the first time they saw some idiot with a gun, fires a gun over there and one of somebody over there drops dead. Life's a bitch and then you die. So 37 minutes and a bit, I'm going to stop. And I'm going to go back and review all this and see whether I need to do it again. And then the next one I'm going to do is going to be a standard offshoot from this, I think. But thank you.